Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first Digital Inclusion 101 webinar of the year. We are very excited to have you here and talk about digital inclusion essentials. Some housekeeping before we start. This presentation is being recorded, and the recording, slides, and additional resources will be shared after this webinar. We also have a Q&A section at the end, so if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A chat, and we'll be able to answer that. Hi, Kareem. Nice to see some familiar faces. Kareem was our last year's digital equity champion, so we have a champion among us, everybody. All right, so let's move forward. This is our agenda. So we are going to be first talking about National Digital Inclusion Alliance for some new folks that are joining us. Then we'll jump right into digital inclusion definitions and also talking about understanding the barriers. Then we'll talk about some key solutions that our communities are working on, as well as the Digital Navigator program. We'll also talk about the importance and the impact of digital inclusion coalitions, and then some important policy for you all to be aware of, as well as joining the NDIA community. Our lovely co-host has put the presentation slides link in the chat, as well as a resource document of all our NDIA resources that are covered in this webinar, and also more in there as well, just so that it can help you on your journey. And here are our presenters for today. I will introduce myself. Hi, everybody. I'm Pamela Shide. I am the Training and Community Engagement Program Manager here at NDIA. I welcome our new community members, and I also do these bi-monthly Digital Inclusion 101 webinars. And joining us to talk about the policy section is Shauna. So Shauna, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Shauna Edson. I'm the Senior Policy Manager here at NDIA. As Pamela said, I'll be talking about our policy section today, and happy to meet you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shauna, our policy expert. All right, so NDIA. NDIA stands for the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and we advance digital equity by supporting community programs and equipping policymakers to act. We are a nonprofit, and we represent and serve more than 1,900 U.S. affiliates, including 41 tribal entities and organizations in all 50 states, including the District of Columbia, American Samoa, Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands for affordable broadband, access to devices, and digital skills training and support. So here at NDIA, we facilitate knowledge sharing forums, such as our monthly community call, and our upcoming one is this Friday, so make sure to join. We also have working group meetings and our very popular NDIA listserv. And through these knowledge sharing forums, we learn from our community about what's going on the ground, and we draw major themes from what we're hearing, and then we align our advocacy efforts with that. All right, so let's jump into some key terminology. Okay, so the first one is the digital divide. It's the gap between those who have affordable access, digital skills, and support to effectively engage online and those who do not. And so how does this show up? The digital divide, it existed since the beginning of the internet, but as we all saw during the pandemic brought massive awareness to just how important the internet is in accessing, making sure that you have access to high-speed internet, and the importance of that in participating in various aspects of our life, right? So the pandemic, it exposed some harsh realities that many communities have, in which they don't have the same type of access to digital skills, same type of access to high-speed internet, as well as tech support to engage online. So what does that look like? It looks like people having to cut their internet service because it's too expensive. They're not able to afford it. It also looks like students falling behind in class because they aren't able to connect to their virtual classrooms or not have the skills to be able to know how to navigate their device. It also looks like not being able to participate in the job market, right? Because somebody might not have the digital skills or know how to navigate the internet safely to learn how to download a resume and learn how to upload it on a job site. And also communities, it also looks like communities not having access to connect to the internet because the infrastructure isn't there. So this gap exists, One cause is that it stems from widespread underinvestment in broadband infrastructure, especially in low-income communities. And this is also known as digital redlining. So this is more of a systemic barrier. Digital redlining, it's discrimination by internet service providers in deployment, maintenance, upgrade, or delivery of services. And you see this in all types of communities, but especially based on race and income. And our friends over at the Markup, they found that in 15 cities, historically redlined areas disproportionately received slow internet speeds. All right. And the next is digital equity. So this is what we like to call the goal. And so when NDIA first started in 2015, one of our first priorities was to work with our community in developing language that accurately reflected the work that was being done on the ground. And this collaborative effort led to the creation of the terms like digital equity and digital inclusion. And our community has always been our primary source in developing vocabulary around our movement. So if you go to our definitions page, you can see all the terms that we worked alongside our community in developing. And so the definition of digital equity, it's the condition where everyone in our community can get online and use the internet in the way that they want to. So with digital equity, it comes with power for all community members to engage, participate, and be active members in our society. And what does that look like? It looks like people being able to educate themselves, advocate for, and find community around social issues that are important for them. And that is especially crucial right now. It also looks like people who are experiencing homelessness, for them to being able to use their device to find community resources, housing, being able to enroll in government programs, and also being able to stay connected with their friends and their network. And it also looks like people being able to access telehealth services, being able to get a proper diagnosis, pay their medical bill online, and schedule an appointment online, which they don't have to go into the office for anymore. And having access to the internet and being able to participate includes ways in which other aspects other than economy and academics, that the internet enriches our lives in other ways too, right? So that also looks like being able to connect with your heritage, learn your native language so you can have a deeper conversation with your grandparents, or being able to book a vacation online, or book a massage online, things like that, right? The internet enriches our lives in so many ways. And just to talk more about why the term digital equity, right? Equity, why we're using the word equity instead of just equality. And so to put it simply, equality does not serve our communities, right? Equality, the definition of that, it's where each individual or group is given the same amount of resources, while equity recognizes that individuals and communities have different circumstances and barriers that allows them in which resources need to be effectively distributed so that everybody can reach an equal outcome. So digital equity means meeting our community members and our community individuals where they're at. So it's understanding what their specific challenges and barriers are that prevent their community from getting online and using the internet effectively. And so barriers can look very different within each community, even if we're in the same type of location, right? And equity forces us to not make those certain assumptions of what those barriers and those community needs are. And so, as we talked about, some communities are experiencing systemic barriers like digital redlining, but other communities, they also might struggle with things like cost. Like, having the high cost of internet is a barrier for why they're not online. Other communities might have limited digital skills, or the skills that are being offered in classes is not really what they're interested in, right? Maybe they just want to learn how to download an app and they're not really interested in all the other kind of aspects that a digital skills program is providing. And so we do this by making sure that we learn the unique needs of what our community members have. So this looks like, are there multilingual trainers in your program or event? Are the trainers coming from shared lived experiences with that community? And have community members and community leaders been part of the digital skills framework planning or the event process? It also looks like, is the location of your event, is it accessible for the community you're trying to serve? Is it in a location that they feel safe in? Is it in a location that they can easily transport to? Is the timing of the event, does it match the lifestyle or when your community members are usually free? Is your event free? Is there a cost to that? And what does, how does that look like in regards to your community, the community members that you're trying to impact? And then we have digital inclusion. So this is the work. It's those activities necessary to achieve digital equity. And so that looks like access to reliable and affordable high-speed internet, access to affordable and appropriate devices, and also providing digital skills training and support. And it's the work that you are all doing in some form or fashion. And we'll go into detail in the next few slides about what those activities specifically look like. But to demonstrate how digital equity plays out, we have two activities for you. All right, so the link to the Padlet should be in the chat. All right, thank you so much, Shauna. And so as you're all kind of thinking, I will switch my screen to look at the Padlet activity, but I want you all to think about this first scenario. So scenario number one is your organization distributed hotspot devices to your community, and you found that only 40% of those hotspots were used. Why do you think that is? So you can put your answer in the chat if you're not able to answer it on Padlet, but I'll give you a few moments to think about that. And to participate on Padlet, if you take your mouse and go down to the bottom right where there's that plus sign, you can put your answer here in that subject line and you should be good to go, and then hit publish. So again, your organization distributed hotspot devices to your community and you found that only 40% of those devices were used. So kind of thinking about, why do you think only 40% of those hotspots were used? What was missing there? Somebody wrote, because some people do not know how to use, might not know how to use it. They may need guidance. Absolutely. Households do not have appropriate devices to connect to the hotspots. Absolutely. People don't know how to use them. They didn't have a device, perhaps. Yes. Thank you for those who are sharing. A lot of people here are addressing not having the proper device and also the digital skills. Oh, somebody asked a really great question. How was this program advertised? Who heard about it and where? That's a great thing to consider. Where was the outreach being done? Was it only online? Did you go to those community boards? Did you go to those places where your target community is showing up and putting paper advertisements there? Somebody says lack of knowledge of how to use the hotspots. Exactly. So if you distributed these devices, but the instruction manual is not in the language that that community speaks, or it's too technical, that could be a big issue there. Another potential reason here is that even if there is an instruction manual, people may be more comfortable if there was a digital navigator there or somebody there to like actually walk them through the process and answer those questions, right? Sometimes it's not enough to just have a piece of paper, here's the instructions and here's the email, especially if the skills aren't there for them to contact that person via email. Somebody says lack of in-person outreach in different languages. Absolutely. And some users may be fearful. Thank you so much for addressing the fear aspect of this, right? And this is especially great when you have folks there that can help answer questions, because that fear is like, well, is my data safe? What information will you have if I use this? And those are really important questions to ask and answer. Somebody said 40% of the community use Our hotspots, it is really high number of the community. Yeah, it is. But just kind of seeing if you're looking at, okay, who isn't using this and how can we target that community? These are kind of some good questions to kind of reflect on. Awesome. Thank you all. And we have one more scenario. So let me share that really quick. I'll update it on the actual Padlet. Okay. So scenario number two, it's at the top of the page again. So you're offering a digital skills class. People aren't picking up the skill and your attendance is dropping off. Think about why that is. What are some reasons for why people are not showing up to those digital skills classes? And you can still do the same thing where you hit the plus and just answer with this new prompt. Oh, and I see that for the previous prompt, Pamela, hi, hello, Pamela, as a Pamela, shared hotspot users may not have the digital literacy skills necessary to use the hotspots. I would have to survey the community using a non-digital method to find out the real issue. Absolutely. Thank you. That's a really a great thought and action plan into figuring out what's that gap there. All right, so for this second scenario about offering digital skills classes, somebody put engagement strategies are not effective, or maybe the curriculum is not accessible in different languages. Absolutely. If you are creating a lesson plan, but it's not really what that community wants, or if you can see that the material is going over their head, then maybe it needs to be, kind of more on the basic level of like, how do I find the app store or things like that, really kind of assessing like are the needs of the classroom and starting there. Um, Somebody wrote improper assessment and of the ability of the participants, thank you. May have lack of flexibility, so no time to study from work or childcare. Yes, if the classes aren't flexible with kind of their lived reality of that community, then absolutely people will drop off showing up, because if it's between, taking care of your child, making money, or going to a digital skills class, I think we all know what the community will have to kind of sacrifice between those three options. Um, Somebody said not having a babysitter to be able to go to class. Exactly. So maybe if that's the case, you know, uh, seeing if a potential, childcare option is available to include in that digital skills class, or scheduling it at around a time that is more accessible for everybody. Somebody says they don't have equipment to practice the skills at the classes or at home. Exactly. Because any skill, if you only do it once a week, can be it's really easy to regress in that and not remember things. They might have a visual or learning disability. Perfect example. So really understanding like what are the unique needs of that specific class or that cohort, and then adjusting appropriately. And then lastly, somebody said not relevant to the needs of the participant. And somebody says you need a good teacher, right? It could also be that. So if the teacher is not understanding or not being able to see like, hey, this information is not interesting, it's not engaging, it's going over people's heads, and you're not adjusting, then yes, people will not be showing up. All right. Thank you all for participating in this. I will go back to sharing the slides. Okay. All right. So talking about this, it's the next thing is the elements of digital inclusion, right? This is the solution. And so the elements of digital inclusion include making sure our community has access to affordable high-speed internet, affordable and appropriate devices, access to digital skills training. And like a lot of you all kind of mentioned there, is making sure that those digital skills training, not only are they accessible physically or remotely, but it's really catering to that target population. And having quality tech support. So having somebody be able to answer questions in a way that isn't going to make them feel judged or silly for asking such a question, right? And then having online content that is designed to enable self-sufficiency. Okay. So in those examples, we talked and highlighted some different aspects of the unique barriers to digital inclusion. So I'm just going to kind of re-highlight some of them. So one of them in regards to broadband is that it can be very expensive. If you've moved kind of and needing to start up with a new internet service provider, that can be a very expensive thing, or it can be super complicated. That in itself is enough to be a barrier. We talked about, oh, yes, Theodora, Shauna will share the presentation slides in the chat again. Thank you. And they will also be shared after this webinar. Another kind of barrier in regards to devices is that, again, cost, right? Devices can be very expensive, and there are refurbished options out there, and we have a lot of affiliates that are also help refurbish devices, but there's also those those kind of myths that people have about refurbished devices that can also be a barrier as well. The software on that device is outdated. I like to share that during the pandemic, when it started, I worked at a domestic violence shelter. And so that was a big issue that we were seeing with clients. We only had one computer at the shelter, and with everybody having to stay home, people were dropping off. With the virtual court hearings being remote, that did put our clients in a kind of situation where, one, do they even have a device at home? And two, does it have a camera, or is the software too old that you cannot download the proper software to meet up with your legal advocate, or a software to meet with your mental health advocate, things like that. And also with devices is that the device isn't matching the needs that the user has. And those are kind of other things that within digital inclusion work, especially with digital navigators, it's helping, kind of figure out with that community member, hey, what are you looking for? What are you trying to do? Is this for work? Is this just for, kind of scrolling on social media and more for entertainment purposes, and then aligning them with the right device that matches that. And then digital skills, which we all highlighted in the previous examples, right? So it's limited skills. Somebody talked about fear. There's a lot of fear around, hey, the internet looks like a very scary place. It looks like companies' data is just getting leaked left and right. So why should I even be a part of that? I mean, that alone is enough for somebody to not even be interested in looking at different internet options and things like that. And so having somebody there kind of ease those fears and let them know that there are ways to protect yourself can really help. And then again, inaccessible trainings, whether it's physically inaccessible, the training material isn't accessible for different learning styles and abilities, and also it's just not what the community wants to learn. So again, here are the different solutions: affordable broadband, affordable devices, and digital skills training, and we are going to go over each one. All right, so the first one is affordable and low-cost broadband. So what is broadband? It is the transmission of wide bandwidth data over a high-speed internet connection. And in March 2024, so March of last year, the Federal Communications Commission, also the FCC, which is the federal agency in charge of wired and wireless communications, they define the minimum standard for broadband speed as 100 megabits per second for downloading and 20 megabits per second for uploading. And while this is a big step up from the FCC's last minimum standard, which was defined in 2015, and during that it was 25 megabits per second for downloading and 3 megabits per second for uploading, it still doesn't answer the question of, okay, why aren't people who have internet access, how come they're not adopting it, right? How come they're not using it? We're not seeing them online. But another thing for why broadband is important is that having high-speed internet, home connection, it's no longer a luxury, right? It's a necessity, and we're all kind of seeing that live out now. So think about how you paid your most recent bill or the last bill you paid. It will most likely be online, or a form that you filled out. It will most likely be online, right? So being able to access and submit government forms and documents, a lot of that is online now. but high-speed internet, home internet can also help level the economic and academic playing field, especially in rural areas. So that looks like for working remotely, being able to find a higher paying job or being able to increase your skills or take courses that aren't offered locally. And with regards to health, it's also being able to meet with a healthcare provider virtually. And this is really crucial in communities that might not have as much of doctors, or they're dealing with a lack of doctors and health centers in their area. So this is really helpful for them as well. And so this leads to our second term, or second of many, term of broadband adoption. So this is daily access to the internet at high speeds. So this is quality and high capacity that is necessary to accomplish common tasks like paying your utility bill or streaming a new episode on your favorite podcast app. And also that comes with the digital skills necessary to participate online and on a personal device and a secure, convenient network. So digital inclusion programs that focus on access to low cost and affordable internet connectivity may be as technical as a community-owned internet service providers providing internet connectivity directly or providing access to internet in community spaces or buildings. And it also looks like programs could provide guidance, education, and support to community members about what available low-cost internet plans look like. So one of the resources, and NDIA creates many that are free and accessible to you all, is our honor roll of low-cost internet plans. So we at NDIA, we have compiled a list of current offers from internet service providers that have plans with speeds at or above the threshold of 100 megabits for downloading and 20 megabits for uploading, and that their cost, that the maximum monthly subscription is $30 a month, and that the plans included on that page either have no data cap or it's above 1 terabyte. So if you are helping community members kind of find low-cost internet plans, that is a really great resource to have. Another great resource to have is our Digital Inclusion Program Manual. So we partnered with Dell Technologies and members of our awesome NDA community to create a resource full of best practices and recommendations for the digital inclusion community. So in this manual, you'll find best practices for developing a digital inclusion program, recommendations and examples for program models and techniques, as well as guidance for creating a sustainable program. And you can also find all of those in the chat as well as the resource doc. All right. The next solution we'll talk about is appropriate and affordable devices. So device ownership and access, that is essential for digital equity, right? So it's great to have a high-speed internet connection that's affordable, but if you don't have a mechanism of getting online, then we're not fully completing the picture. So this specific area of digital inclusion focuses on matching community members with devices that best match their needs. So digital inclusion programs that focus on devices help community members by providing free and low-cost devices, as well as maintenance of that device and also offering tech support. So kind of like in the example that we talked about, having somebody, walk individuals through how to set up your hotspot, how to connect your device with the hotspot, et cetera. So some programs, they do a learn to earn model. This is where students who finish a digital skills class will receive a device at the end of that training program. And there are also computer refurbishing and recycling programs. So this can be a source of quality quality low-cost computers as well. And these programs also serve as a place for community members to learn about device hardware and also get that tech support. So here's a chart of kind of the pros and cons of each device to help with matching, the user with the right device. So with a smartphone, it's portable, it's a longer battery, but it does not replace the power and the work that you can do with a laptop. With a tablet, it's great for accessibility purposes. There is a longer battery, but you do need to have a cellular data plan if you do plan on making calls with that. And then lastly, a laptop, it's mandatory for jobs, It has a nice large storage. However, it is the least affordable out of all of those things. And in the resource doc, there's also a more detailed description of these, the pros and cons list that we partnered with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and AARP with. And so another thing to kind of think about, some device essentials for digital equity that the awesome organization Digitrinity created is, kind of looking outside of these three main devices is like thinking about other kind of complementary things you need to be able to use this device and be on the internet. So that looks like having a second monitor. If you need to get a webcam for your camera or for your device, let's say you have a desktop, but there is no camera. That's most of the case. If you need a microphone or speakers, if you need a wireless keyboard to be able to actually type on the either the desktop or an iPad or a tablet, and also having a cybersecurity training to know how to safely navigate the internet. And also things like portable chargers. So those are kind of also other aspects to think about when we're thinking about inclusion as it pertains to appropriate devices. And one of the great examples here is the Cramden Institute. So they help support sustainability in their digital inclusion and device ecosystems by providing low-cost devices for community members and nonprofits. And they also build digital skills capacity and tech support through their digital skills classes. So aside from also providing refurbished devices, they also do that kind of triage of providing digital skills classes as well. All right. And then lastly, as it relates to solutions, is the digital skills training. Thank you, John. In the chat, he says for folks with limited capacities like vision, motor, mobility, one will need assistive technology and the training to use it. Absolutely. Sorry, just looking through the chat. Again, we will answer all the questions in the Q&A, but keep those questions coming. And then with digital skills, so digital skills, it's constantly evolving, right? Our operating systems are constantly needing to be updated. With AI, that's constantly being, updated as well, and just more apps are coming out. So always needing to be up to date with some skills. And so one of the things that we like to recommend is the Essential Digital Skills Framework. And this is intended to support adults seeking to improve their digital skills. So some of the kind of categories within the Essential Digital Skills Framework is one of them is communication. So this is being able to communicate, collaborate, and share information on your device. So in kind of practical terms, this looks like being able to set up an email account, being able to post messages, pictures, or content on social media, being able to use a word processing app like Google Docs to create a document, to create your CV, right? Things like that. And then being able to communicate with others using email or other messaging apps. Another category in this kind of foundational skills is being able to handle information and content. So this looks like understanding that not all information and content online is reliable and safe. So it's being able to search for reliable news on a web browser like Chrome or Safari. Another category is transaction. So those type of essential skills looks like being able to set up an online account, right? For, let's say, signing up for public services, or if you want to buy something online. So being able to set up an account, being able to upload your resume to a recruiting website. It also looks like being able to book a plane ticket or make a reservation. So those type of skills. And then also when it comes to the device is learning how to turn your device on and off, learning how to check the battery, knowing when it's time to recharge, and also knowing what the different controls on your device do and being able to get back on the home screen of your device. And so with digital skills programs, that can include having classes for community members, providing one-on-one support, and also community support helpline. Those are the type of aspects that digital skills programs can include. But it's also again, very important to not assume the proficiency level of your community, like somebody had mentioned in the activity. So it's really important to do a assessment needs to figure out where folks are at, kind of what needs do they have, what they want to learn, because all of that information is crucial when you're developing your content. All right. And a great example here is the Community Tech Network. So Community Tech Network, they are an affiliate and they hire culturally competent fluent speakers to offer programs both in person and virtually. And because they hire staff that are fluent and coming from those lived experience, they're able to offer classes in variety of languages like Spanish, Cantonese, Tagalog, Korean, Vietnamese, and Russian. So this goes beyond just translating something on like a flyer. It's really integrating and having that like cultural competence happening in your classroom. And what better way than, having instructors that either are from that community, can speak the same language, or both. All right. Digital navigators. So we have covered important aspects of digital inclusion work like broadband adoption, affordable devices, and digital skills. And one crucial element in connecting our communities to the internet are the digital navigators. And I know there are digital navigators amongst us. And so digital navigators, they are individuals who address the whole digital inclusion process with community members. And this is done through repeated interactions. So that looks like a community member finding helping them find an affordable internet plan, helping them find a refurbished or low-cost device, and then also helping them learn and expand their skills. It's a holistic approach that is glued together by empathy, and consider them as a trusted guide who works with community members and understands what their needs are, kind of where they're at skill-wise, and then connects them to the right resource, or also provide that one-on-one training. And a really good example of this is the Denver Public Library. So what makes them great is that their digital navigators are coming from the communities that they serve. And they also provide resources to the greater digital navigator community. They're also responding to community desires and needs. And they're very hands-on with their community within their digital navigator program. So another resource that NDIA has is our digital navigator model page. So the digital navigator model, it is open and flexible, and it can be adapted to fit the individual community member and also the host organization. So NDIA and our community, we have developed template materials to support digital navigator programs. So that includes having a skills assessment on there, a follow-up survey, having a baseline digital navigator job description. We also have intake forms and exit forms, and we also have a digital navigator toolkit and a digital navigator 101 webinar. So definitely great resources there for you for your digital navigator program. So definitely access that page. And lastly, I'll be talking about digital inclusion coalitions. All right. So coalitions, they are a collective of community organizations that share the common concern of digital inclusion. So this looks like local governments, libraries, education institutions, housing authorities, tech companies, sometimes internet service providers, and of course, social services. So digital inclusion coalitions, they have the unique ability to maximize the impact of digital inclusion efforts. And this is because and coalitions have these three main effects. So that includes being able to raise awareness about the community's digital inclusion issues. Coalitions also have that unique position of aligning the community organization's perspectives and focusing it on digital inclusion. And then also because of just how coalitions are made, there's a network effect. So the community organizations within that coalition are able to learn from one another and be able to kind of relate their programs as it relates to digital inclusion needs and create potential partnerships. Digital inclusion coalitions are also great for funding digital inclusion programs, to raise funds for digital inclusion programs, and also help build political support for public investment as it relates to digital inclusion. So we had recently launched a Digital Inclusion Coalition survey, which wrapped up a few months ago. So have a check out on our coalitions page because we will have a new directory and interactive map of the coalitions on there. And a great example of a coalition is the Y-Zone Coalition. So the Westchester County Association, they partnered with the City of Yonkers, Yonkers Partners in Education, Fordham University, and the STEM Alliance, their Digital Navigator program, and they helped eligible residents in applying for the Affordable Connectivity Program. And so because of this coalition's partnerships, they were able to increase their clients' growth in regards to financial literacy, healthcare literacy, and also build up their workforce development skills. So this is just an example of one of the kind of impact that a digital inclusion coalition can have in the community. And lastly, this is a great resource for you all. It's our Digital Inclusion Trailblazers page. So Digital Inclusion Trailblazers, they are municipal, county, or regional governments that are paving the way and providing excellent models for digitally inclusive communities. And this is a great resource because it serves as a free open knowledge database for digital inclusion resources and information by local governments. So if you check it out, you can see job descriptions, survey templates, and digital equity strategies. All right, next up is policy, and Shauna will talk more about that.
Hey, hi everyone. I am going to talk about a few key things happening in the policy space for digital inclusion right now. The first thing I want to talk about is the Digital Equity Act. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the Digital Equity Act funding. What it's also known as the DEA. It was authorized by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021. And the DEA designated $2.75 billion to establish 3 grant programs that promote digital equity and inclusion: the planning grant, the capacity grant, and the competitive grant. So the first set of funds in the Digital Equity Act was the state planning grant program. That grant period has ended, and now all states and territories have a digital equity plan. The second set of funds is the State Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program. Applications for states has already closed and awards have been made for that. The application for the Native Entities Capacity Grant Program, which is part of the State Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program, opened in September and closed on February 7th of this year. And lastly, we have the competitive grant program. Applications were due of September 23rd of this year, and NDIA, who's the organization that manages that grant program, expects to start awarding funds in winter of this year, which they have done, and I'll talk about in just a second. Okay, next slide. So NDIA, like I said, received all the applications for the capacity grant program, and states will use these funds to put their digital equity plans into action. This matters to our community, the NDIA community, because you will see new digital inclusion activities and programs emerge in the next year, and states may award subgrants to organizations doing digital equity work in their state. So next slide. Like I mentioned, over the past 2 years, states and territories went through a really rigorous planning process to write digital equity plans. And now that they're ready to get those rolling with these funds, they will be focusing on their covered populations, implementing measurable strategies by collecting and analyzing data to show the success of the activities the program funds, encouraging meaningful and long-lasting change. So this means they want to see sustainable digital equity programs, as well as engaging stakeholders to ensure that digital inclusion activities are supporting the folks that they serve. All right, next slide. Like I mentioned, Some states and territories may choose to award subgrants to implement their state's digital equity plan, and we've seen those subgrant programs open up in different states across the country. So if that's something that you or your organization would be interested in, I suggest you look and see check with your state broadband office. State program, the subgrant programs can support things like implementing the plan, digital inclusion activities that align with the plan, as well as requirements for reporting. Okay, next slide, please. And the Native Entities Capacity Grant Program, like I said before, is part of the same Notice of Funding Opportunity as the state capacity grant program, but it's a little different specific to Native entities. The applications were due on February 7th, and the set aside for this specific program was $45.3 million available. And the grants are competitive, which means that not everybody that applied will get a grant. All right, next slide, please. And then the NOFO says NTIA expects to begin making awards to Native entities in the summer of 2025, and funds are likely to be issued on a rolling basis. So if you're awarded funds, you must complete the grant within 5 years. And these funds can be used for Native entities to create digital equity plans and implement digital inclusion activities, or to just implement digital inclusion activities on tribal lands. Okay, next slide, please. So as you can see here, that leaves the last bucket of funds, which is a competitive grant program of $1.25 billion. All right, next slide. The Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program awards eligible entities, including but not limited to local governments, nonprofits, and community anchor institutions. And Congress appropriated $1.25 billion for this program, and the goal is to create long-term capacity building for bridging the digital divide across communities nationwide. The grants went live, like I said, in 2024, and we saw the first organizations recommended for award in January. So the use, next slide, please. So the competitive grant funds applications must include digital inclusion activities that align with state plans, enhance or go above and beyond the plan, or address barriers that the state digital equity plan did not identify. So there are currently 66 organizations recommended for a DEA competitive grant program award. Those were recommended, like I said, in January of this year. Because most of the money is not obligated for this grant program, we think it is at risk. While ensuring that taxpayer dollars are used responsibly, it's important to advocate for these funds. Some things that could happen would be lengthy program pauses, new compliance hurdles, excessive bureaucracy, which could leave organizations unable to carry out their programs effectively or force them to walk away altogether. This could result in people of all ages losing access to essential tools and the training needed to participate in the digital world, like we've talked about today, in all the different ways. So to save the Digital Equity Act's capacity and competitive grant programs, we need more people to understand these programs will actually do, which is help people talk to their doctors, take online classes, get jobs, avoid scams, and things like that. This requires all of us to talk to policymakers about the impact these types of programs, the work that a lot of you are doing, the impact they have in your communities. So talking to the media and working in your community to raise awareness of that. So to support this work, NDIA has created a suite of resources and tools that can be used for advocacy and awareness of the DEA. Okay, next slide. We're going to move on to talking about digital discrimination. The rules for digital discrimination officially went into effect in March of 2024. The rules cover any aspect of broadband and internet access services that impedes, impairs, or denies equal access to that service. This could look like discrimination in pricing, customer service, and network or infrastructure upgrades. The rules protect consumers even if there was no intent to discriminate. This means that if someone was impacted by discrimination, the provider will be responsible even if the discrimination was not intentional. However, the new FCC chairman, Brandon Carr, eliminated the Digital Discrimination Task Force on January 21st of this year as part of ending the agency's promotion of all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. This was in response to President Trump's order titled Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing. So that puts the future of this program as uncertain. So all individuals and communities through this program can and should file complaints of digital discrimination with the FCC. And we can provide a link where if people have a complaint, they can file this with the FCC. You can also use this link to provide details if you have concerns regarding the elimination of the Digital Discrimination Task Force. Okay, next slide. Broadband labels. So all ISPs with over 100,000 subscribers must display the broadband labels by October of 2024. So these things include information on pricing, introductory rates, data allowances, performance metrics, and other things. So I would highly encourage you to check and see if you can find a broadband label for your internet plan. They're really useful tools for educating folks about different types of plans available. Some of them are just right on the front of a website for the internet service providers. Others require you to enter an address as if you were signing up for the plan. So check those out. All right, and then I am going to pass it back to, well, I don't know, do you want me to talk about the resource manual? The policy team did create the State Digital Equity Implementation Manual, which is a great guide to showing how state digital equity plans are going to get turned into action. It was written for states, but it's really for everybody to understand that process better. And then lastly, we have some Digital Equity Act advocacy tools. These tools are, like I mentioned, the Digital Equity Act funds could be at risk, particularly the competitive grant program and possible future capacity grant program funding as well. So advocating and raising awareness about the work that we're all doing, like I mentioned, is essential. So this website has templates for writing letters to members of Congress, information on how to find your representatives, as well as like funding allocations per state for the Digital Equity Act. And then if you do receive funding, ways to celebrate all digital inclusion funding, not just that limited to the Digital Equity Act, ways to have celebrations, ideas, agendas, and how to invite your representatives. Okay, now I'll pass it back to Pamela.
Thank you so much, Shauna. So just a few things before we wrap up and move to the Q&A. We do have a upcoming webinar, speaking of advocacy. We have an upcoming webinar for this coming Monday, February 24th. It's called How Your Organization Can Influence Policy for the Greater Good. And NDIA, we've partnered with Boulder Advocacy to provide this webinar. And so nonprofits have a close-up view of community needs and can and should take advantage of their right to influence law and policy. So after this workshop, you're going to learn how you will have a more clear understanding of what advocacy activities your organization can engage in, what communications count as lobbying, and how to maximize your non-lobbying advocacy. So definitely check that out. And we do have NDIA working groups. So we have our Digital Inclusion Coalition working group. If you are part of a Digital Inclusion Coalition and you are a NDIA affiliate, then you are able to join. And if you want to be part of that working group, contact Paolo. Their email is on the slide. We also have a Digital Navigator working group. So if you are part of a Digital Navigator program in your organization, and you are also an affiliate, then contact Nate at digitalinclusion.org. And we also have a community-led working group. It's called the Digital Workforce Alliance. So if you do kind of workforce development, then reach out to me, Pamela at digitalinclusion.org, and we can get you added there. All right. And the last thing I also want to talk about is Net Inclusion. So Net Inclusion, it is our annual conference, and it is the premier digital inclusion conference. It's going to be in May 20 through the 22nd at Gila River Indian Community. And it's a great conference for you to meet with other digital inclusion practitioners and other advocates. And so things that we talk about there is federal policies impacting digital equity, digital inclusion best practices across the country, as well as digital inclusion programming. So things like Digital Navigator, digital health equity, accessibility, serving diverse populations, and community-centered work. And also part of Net Inclusion is our lightning rounds. So lightning rounds is a 3-minute presentation where you have, you get 5 slides and you have 3 minutes to create one impact. So that is if your organization hosted a event and you had some best practices there, or did a pilot program and you wanted to share and highlight some of those successful initiatives. This is a great opportunity for that. The deadline for applying is going to be March 7th. And lastly, our nominations for Digital Equity Champions are now open. And so if you know somebody who is doing amazing digital inclusion work and you believe that they should be nominated for the Digital Equity Champion Award, nominations are open until March 18. And there is a link in the chat for more information about that. And if you're not part of the NDIA community, we welcome you. You are not alone in your work. There are over 3,000 affiliates on our very popular listserv that can help direct you, answer your questions, or provide resources to any type of questions you have in your programming. You have access to our monthly community calls, our monthly newsletter, and again, that listserv. All right. So we just have a few minutes left for questions. I did kind of note some questions down, Shauna, in case you haven't answered them. One is, has NTIA given any comment on the status of the Digital Equity Competitive Grant?
Yeah, they have not given a statement. The competitive grant program is part of the Digital Equity Act, which is an act of Congress. So it would take an act of Congress to change it, to take it away fully. But they can do other things like slow down the bureaucracy so it's harder to get to funds, change requirements of the program, reporting and things like that. So that's where that stands right now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Shauna. And hello, John. John had put a question, I think it's more just for the community here, asking if anyone has done kind of something similar in their state, where they have a industry-based certification process for job training and development. This is a great question to ask on our listserv. But John did put their contact information if anyone has done something similar. And then lastly, somebody asked, how do you all at NDA think about device access provided through library computer labs. So we are big supporters for libraries, and we think that those computer labs are essential. They're essential and they're crucial. Oftentimes, those are kind of the only access people have to devices. So we definitely are in big support of that as well. And I believe there are also library programs that do have kind of device lending programs as well. So that's a really great resource for the community to have. Yes, go libraries. Awesome. And we are also available through email if you have any questions. But in the meantime, again, this coming Friday is our community call, and we invite you to join if you are not part of our community as already. And the recording, presentation slides, and additional resources will be shared to you after this webinar. All right. Thank you, everybody, for participating. This was amazing. We appreciate you for coming, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you all.